Hello, everybody, and welcome to the RNet webinar. It's 1 minute to 2 p.m. We'll start the webinar shortly. 56 people had registered, and I see 24, 25 have joined now. So I guess I'll wait like 2 minutes after 2 minutes after 2, and at that point we'll start. So just allowing everybody to join. I hope that everybody can hear me. The plan for today is to have a short overview of what we've done so far. So of all the RNet products, though I'm not gonna go into depth, there is the recent previous webinar for that. And after that, I'll share some product news. So a few of the latest additions to the RNet product family. Yeah, then a small part will be devoted to the roadmap. And of course, as the final, last but not least, the long-awaited cloud demo. And yeah, so essentially this is the agenda for today. So it is 2:01. I'm gonna wait a little bit longer. Yeah, so for those who haven't seen the last webinar, I can actually show you that. Let's see, just a second. So for those of you who haven't seen the last webinar, we have actually a site which is the RNet forum, and it is either forums with an S, or if you go to just forum.rnet.com, this is where I will be posting this webinar as well, the recording, and this is where you can find also the previous webinar recording. The forum, we are planning actually to revive the RNet forum, to put in FAQ here, well, which is already there, but actually revive it in terms also of, technical questions regarding RNet 4, as well as the RNet system itself. So basically the forum in the future might serve as the first line of technical support. But if we're talking about the webinar itself, so if you go to forums.rnet.com, you click on webinars, you can see this is the last webinar over here. So there was also a questionnaire of what do you want to see in the next webinar. But anyway, the last webinar, here's the YouTube video. You can actually download it. And there's also the PowerPoint presentation. So yeah, so this webinar was held at 15th of April this year. So a lot of things have changed since then. So anyway, this is just to let you know that this is the place where you'll see also this webinar. Okay, it is 2:03. We have 37 of the attendees here. I think it's safe to actually start. So there's a sidebar where you can pose questions. So if the questions will be short during the presentation, I'll try to answer them, let's say, on the spot. If it's something a bit which requires a bit more explanation, going into a bit more depth, then we've saved the Q&A for the end of the webinar. But anyway, I see that Martis has written hello into the question bar, so I see your questions. So that's all fine. So anyway, let's start off. So this standard slide that everybody of you has probably already seen before, and is probably already sick of it. So what is ARANET? Of course, it's our wireless sensor network. Here's the main benefits, simple installation, long receiving range, very good battery life, uh, nothing new here. What I want to show as, let's say, well, it's not a new thing, but just basically to understand what we understand by the ARANET architecture and how it has been, and how it will be going forward is basically, so you see here that if we're looking at the ARANET architecture, then if we're looking at the sensor and base station level, there is only one-way communication. So except, of course, for the time of the pairing of the sensor, that's the only point where the sensor and the base station are communicating both ways. But once the sensor has been paired to the base station, that's it. Then only the sensor is sending the data, the base station is receiving the data, and so as far as before the cloud, everything stopped here. So essentially now, when the cloud is ready, well, at least the beta version of the cloud is ready, the way it works is that actually the base station can initiate communication to the cloud. So this is actually a two-way communication. So the base station is sending data to the cloud, and the cloud is requesting also the data from the base station. And the base station is the one doing the initial, let's say, this initial uh, connection, and that was the problem beforehand when we had if you wanted to connect to this to the ARNet base station from somewhere else. This was all this hustle of getting a fixed IP address, and then you have to configure the port forwarding. Essentially, this is because normal places with normal internet have a firewall on top of it, so that you know people from outside can't just randomly initiate communications with your computer and grab your data. So this is why the communication will be essentially initiated on the base station side. Then it kind of opens this tunnel, and then in most organizations, if you don't have some super high level security, in most organizations, this is enough to have this bilateral uh, communication, and this will also make life easier. Of course, the cloud also allows for multiple base stations. So here we have, in the image too. Theoretically, we don't really know currently what are the limits, but at any stage along the way, of course, the limits can be increased, even if there are some. So this is the basic ARNet architecture. So you have sensors sending the data to the base station, then the base station communicates to the cloud, and the cloud communicates back to the base station. So let's go into the product. So this is something that also you've seen before, so I'm not going to go super into depth because these are our regular temperature sensors. If there's something unclear about them, you can watch the previous webinar where I explain a bit more into depth, I think the one only addition that has been put in the ARANET temperature sensor family since is the ARANET Compact T. So we've had it for a while. This is a small compact size temperature sensor that it is only measuring temperature. I think this one is actually the cheapest of the of our sensors, and it does have like a food grade plastic, so it's perfect for supermarkets. This is the one that we're actually installing in 125 stores of Rimi all across Latvia, because you know, if this little thing drops into food, you can take it out and the food is, you know, still edible. So yeah, other than that, I think you've seen them all before. Going forward, also another slide that I'm not going to waste too much time on. This is our horticulture sensor family. So went a lot into depth in the previous webinar. If you want to hear more about it, you can check that one out. There have been additions to this. Well, yeah, and this will be in the future slides. But these sensors, as they are now, there have been a few changes in the latest firmware releases, especially if we're talking about the ARANET weight sensor. So now we have this concept of derived measurements. Essentially what that means is you can create a virtual sensor that allows for summing the weight. So normally if we are talking about, you know, tomato growers where they have like you know, where they hang their tomatoes, or they hang, well, not just tomato growers, anyone who hangs something to measure its weight. Usually it's, you can't really do it with one weight sensor, so you use two. And in the latest software versions, you now don't only have to get like two different weight measurements, but you actually get the sum of them. So it's kind of, you create a virtual sensor, which is the sum of the both sensors that you specify. So I hope that's, you know, clear, relatively straightforward if you have weight sensors and the new firmware. Um, Other sensors, not really much has changed. So CO2 sensors, lux sensor. I haven't talked about the signal test sensor in the previous webinars, although we've had it almost since the beginning of the ARANET system itself. But essentially, for those of you that don't know, this is a sensor that's used for site surveys. Essentially, this is our, you know, regular temperature relative humidity sensor, with a small exception that it has this big red button over here. This is done to kind of do a site survey before an installation to check the signal strength. So the way it works is whenever you press that button, only when you press that button, the sensor sends the data to the base station. And you can use this to actually see at which points how is the signal strength at each point, and this is how you can actually verify that, you know, there's good enough signal before installation, or you can actually find out what is the best place for sensor placement. So yeah, so this is something I haven't talked beforehand in the webinars, but this is really available for a long time. Yeah, so all of the rest, you know, the voltage sensor, the current sensor, which is used actually for third-party integration, so nothing new there. Going forward, let's see, yeah, ARANET 4. So the ARANET 4 has also been available for a while. The main difference here, since the last time we did a webinar, is that we actually have two versions. So there is ARONET for Home and there's ARONET for Pro. So essentially this was made to kind of differentiate between B2B customers and B2C customers, and also to be able to create a cheaper product for the B2C customers. In the B2C segment, which is called ARONET for Home, this is a ARONET 4 device without the LoRa chip in. So this won't allow, if you buy this one, it will not come with the possibility to integrate it into the base station, meaning it won't send the data. And this comes without the chip in within it, so there's no like upgrades possible. So this is to actually, make it as cheap as possible and make it more accessible to the consumer. And then we have the ARONET Pro, ARONET 4 Pro, which is your standard current, the ARONET 4 that you're used to. That has this possibility to connect to the ARONET base station, to the whole ARONET Pro, ARONET Pro, let's say, ecosystem. I see a question that is there any relay on any device? So essentially, I will come to that. Currently, the answer is no. When we'll have the new base station out, then there will be a possibility for a relay. But that is in the future, so that is for the roadmap segment. Let's not jump ahead. Anyway, so now we've kind of covered these old products. Let's jump to the new releases. And the first new release that is actually accessible since a week ago, I think, is the ARONET ultrasonic level sensor. So the ARONET ultrasonic level sensor is essentially made for measuring levels in gas tanks, in feeding silos, for measuring water level. So the way it works is it sends a ultrasonic pulse, gets the reflecting signal, and measures the distance. So the current version has the measurement range from 0.5 meter to 10 meters, and the accuracy is 1% of the reading. It is IP67, which means that it can be dropped into water. It's water proof, let's say, but it can't be left in water for long periods of time. So essentially, yeah, it shouldn't stay inside of water, and it's these kind of radio things anyway won't work inside of water because water kind of attenuates the signal. The other new release is the ARONET soil volumetric water content sensor, which is actually a cheaper version of the current soil sensor. So the current soil sensor measures volumetric water content. It also measures, electroconductivity, and also measures the soil temperature. This one only measures soil moisture. It is a less precise version, but it's also at least 3 times as cheap, maybe even more. I don't remember on the top of my head, but this is basically to kind of make this soil sensor more accessible to people who just need just the soil moisture content. Essentially, to kind of manage these expectations, as you see here, it has a relatively low accuracy, so it is kind of only indicative. So to just say whether or not, the soil is wet and what is the tendencies, how fast does the soil dry out, and all of these. It is available into 4 different cable length, so 1.5 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters, and 20 meters. So this is also available from now. So now we've actually, faster than I expected, gotten to the roadmap version. So the little disclaimer over here that these things in the roadmap and the dates might change. I see also that question about when, and this is something that will be answered in this segment. But first, of course, this is the ARNet pulse sensor, which is the nearest one. Which will actually be released ASAP. Essentially, it is ready. There's some lost documentation things that needs to be settled. So we expect this sensor to be released probably within the next week. Here is actually a demonstration of the representation in the software, just to kind of get an idea how the sensor will work. So what is a pulse sensor? So a pulse sensor is something that counts the pulses. What does that mean? So essentially it looks very similar. It looks identical to our current and voltage sensor. And what it does, it actually counts how many times these two wires are being connected between measurements. So it is usually used in flow meters. So the way that a flow meter works is that you have some flow going through, let's say, some kind of spinning thing that has this little magnet on top of it, and by telling how fast it spins, that magnet actually connects a circuit each time the spinning thing goes past it. And by knowing that, uh, by knowing that, you can actually determine what is this flow rate. And this is the representation of what you can see in the software. The first one is the period pulses. So essentially, what is the pulse rate between each period? So if I think this device here has like a measurement interval of once every minute, and you see here, it's spinning relatively slow, so it only, generates 8 pulses between each measurement. And then on the bottom over here, you get cumulative pulses. So that is basically the summation of all the total, pulses that you've had so far. And actually in the software, you'll be able to put in a conversion. So what does that mean? That means that you can say, okay, 100 pulses is 1 liter of water, and then the software will actually show you not just the pulses, but it will show you, that 10 liters of water, 100 liters, 1000 liters of water have flowed through. So essentially, there are some limitations that you see here that, minimal interval between pulses is 30 milliseconds. So essentially, if you connect these two wires faster than 30 milliseconds, they won't register. But most pulse type of output will not have more frequent, let's say, connections, more frequent more frequent pulses. The frequency is essentially the same thing, only inversed. The minimal pulse width means that what is the minimal amount of time that these wires have to be connected that it actually registers a pulse. So we are talking here mechanical signals. So 10 milliseconds is super fast for mechanical signals. So these are not, this is not for digital signals, right? So essentially you can't really, open and close a switch, a mechanical switch, a normal mechanical switch at least, faster than these 10 milliseconds. So this should be more than enough. So again, just for mechanical measurements. So going further, there's an interesting new planned sensor. Don't currently have the photo of it here, but essentially we are working in projects that involves pig farms and chicken farms and things like that. And we've discovered that for that we need an ammonia resistant temperature and relative humidity sensor. Yeah, not much to tell more about it, except that ammonia is a very corrosive environment. So because of that, a lot of electronics break down when they're used in ammonia environments, and places like chicken farms, pig farms, anything to do with animals, um, involve some level of ammonia. I think, if I remember correctly, uh, the um, the limitations is like 20 parts per million of ammonia. But yeah, normal sensors break down after half a year, something like that. And so this is like the IP68 class is not enough for that, and this is why we are actually making an ammonia resistant temperature and relative humidity sensor. So it's going to be probably available by Q1, so the first quarter of next year. Going further, also probably going to be available from the beginning of next year is the IP67 CO2 sensor. And not only CO2, it will also measure temperature, relative humidity, and atmospheric pressure. Essentially, it will be like ARANET 4 without a screen and in, liquid resistive environments. So meant for greenhouses, places where there's high humidity, things like that. So this one will also have the non-dispersive infrared CO2 sensor built into it, and this is how the form factor will look. And going further, also we arrive to the chemical gas sensor, so electrochemical gas sensors. And this is a completely, let's say, new direction that ARANET is entering, and will have new new sensors, new gases that we plan to measure. One of that is ammonia, NH3. So this also comes together with these, pig farms, chicken farms, places like that, where ammonia needs to be measured. Planned release is around the second quarter of next year. Then another thing that has been requested a lot is the NO2 sensor. Nitrogen dioxide. This is especially has been become popular since all of the Volkswagen scandals and all of these things. Essentially, these are these deadly poisonous gases that are coming out of cars. Also, an interesting thing to kind of measuring if we're talking about air quality, air pollution, things like that. Another interesting sensor, it's going to be released by a similar time period, is the carbon monoxide sensor. So this is very important for places that still use burning firewood and similar things. Carbon monoxide is a gas that essentially is created when something is burning in an atmosphere where there's not enough oxygen. Carbon monoxide forms. It is, as I remember, heavier than air, and it is very poisonous, and it is like an odorless gas that you cannot detect, and if you don't notice it, it can actually kill you. So most, of course, appliances in most places, don't use live burning wood, but it is still a risk in a lot of countries. It is so there's a lot of these so there's a lot of let's say, yeah, possibilities to use it. So there's a question about the range of these sensors. Actually, I don't remember on the top of my head. I should have put this into the presentation. I will forward you this information afterwards because I don't really remember this on the top of my head. Sorry for that. We have some preliminary data sheets available, so I'll be able to forward this after the webinar. So the long-awaited question about the ARANET Mark II, the ARANET second base station, second version of the, okay, third version of the base station if we count the ARANET Mini as the first one. So essentially, around the second half of 2020, this is kind of indicative only. We will have this second base station that kind of will have this first relay functionality. Due to some other priorities, especially the ARNet cloud, it has been pushed a bit further down the line. So second half of 2020. It will be a full outdoor version. So this is the base station that you can put outdoors. It will be fed through power over Ethernet. It will have external antennas, which means that possibly a wider range in terms of, let's say, distance. It will have 8 channels, which will enable it to have more sensors. The precise amount of sensors still to be determined. We expect up to 1,000, at least 500, probably more, but it's going to be in the ballpark of 500, between 500 and 1,000. So 16 relays. So a relay is something that you'll be able to turn on and turn off. So this is going to be the first also base station that has this bi-directional communication that can actually send something back to the sensor, a relay in this case, and at least in the first instance, turn something on or turn something off. Of course, this won't be something that you can use for mission critical things of turning something on or off, because it is still radio, so it is still best effort, and there's still always the risk of a packet loss. So you won't use this to control some kind of irrigation system that you need to turn off exactly in the minute. But something like, if we're talking about heating, that you can turn on or turn off, and if you're controlling it once every minute, and maybe one signal out of 500 doesn't arrive, and you turn the heating on or off a minute later, that's not that bad, right? So just to kind of manage these expectations as well. It will have built-in GSM capabilities for data transmission. So last time I couldn't say whether it's just going to be for the alarms, or it's going to be for data transmission. So the first software release probably will not support it. We'll try to release it before we have all of these things down, but afterwards, with a firmware update, you'll be able to have a built-in SIM card, and you'll be able to send also the data over GSM. So if you have like a remote location where there is no internet connection and you need send the data to the ARONET cloud or something, you'll have the possibility to do so. So speaking of the ARONET cloud, I guess we've come to the point where it is time to speak about the ARONET cloud. I know that everybody has been patiently waiting for the cloud, and it has, at least in the beta version, arrived. After this webinar, I will invite everybody who is interested in testing the beta version to email either me or your respective sales manager, and we will set up a beta cloud account for you, where you can test the cloud, see the functionality, give us feedback, help us improve it, and we expect a ready for sales version at a beginning of next year. So again, this is just the beta cloud, but it is there. Before I show you a demo, just a quick overview of the cloud benefits. So why do we even need the cloud? So multi-location sensor data capture. So essentially that means you can have many base stations, and you will be able to see everything in a single dashboard. Data backup. So as you know, all of the data is stored on the ARONET Pro device as of now, and then it's going to be, well, it is forwarded also to the cloud. So now you have a nice backup, because you have this data redundancy. If anything, for example, happens to either the base station or the cloud, wherever the cloud is hosted, you still have the data, right? So that is a nice extra thing to have. I know that a lot of places do require this, second database. Other things, yeah, this availability to access the data from anywhere, so it's not going to be this pain in the neck fixed IP address type of thing that it is now. Now you're just gonna have, you know, a very simple, straightforward, you know, possibility to register your base station, and you know, without a hassle. All of the other things, you know, yeah, of course, integrations. So we hope if we're doing, you know, integrations in the future, most of them wherever, you know, let's say internet is available, wherever internet is available, we will prefer to do cloud integrations. But, you know, the regular API and all of that, it will still be available, so that is not going anywhere. But, you know, this simplifies things a lot. So, I guess without further ado, just I have to, let's say, once. So yeah, let's go to the ARANET cloud. So this is the ARANET. So if you go to aranet.cloud, don't need the login part. This is how it resolves. Anyway, I'll log into my own cloud account. So, technica.com. Okay, and oh, it saved my password. Lovely. Enter. Okay, so big confusing screen and dashboard. So let's walk over these things one by one. So on the bottom here, you have like our organization management. So I can actually, I'm part of two organizations, so I can actually log into, you know, Softtechnica's organization, and we have like, you know, uh, the information about the base station that's here. But for this special demo, they actually set up a my own organization, and this is something that you'll see when you'll test the beta as well. So you'll have your own name over here, whatever is your organization. So my organization is Storms for now. If we go to the settings screen over here, you can see that there are actually, I connected two base stations in preparation for this webinar. So one of them was connected 2 days ago. The other base station was connected 3 days ago. So you can see like the name of it, you know, the serial number, when it was registered, when it had the last push to the cloud. Essentially, yeah, so these kind of things. And just to actually show you that these are, you know, real base stations, and we can have a comparison. So this is something that you've actually seen before. So this is one of the base stations. It's actually here. So I have it also on the local soft network over the Ethernet connection. So this is one of them, and this is the other one. So this is your, you know, normal, just, you know, your regular, what you would see when you would just log directly to the base station, either over Ethernet or over Wi-Fi. So I have this one base station that has like 3 ARANET 4 connected. It has two temperature and relative humidity sensors, and it actually has a bar meter connected that is pointed to a window. It is a lovely rainy day in Latvia today, so it is showing 31 micromoles per meter second squared. And then there's the other one that also has two temperature relative humidity sensors and an ARANET 4 that I've named Traveler, because this is the one that I usually take with me wherever I go. So there's a question actually. So do you plan to have a version of the cloud software to be installed on a client's provided server in cases when the client is not willing to send data out of the company? And the answer is yes. So of course, this is not going to be available ASAP. This is not going to be, available from 1st of January, but in general, yes, the cloud has been built on something that is called Docker. So Docker is now, I hope I'm using my terminology correctly, but Docker is kind of like a framework which essentially allows to package this cloud into, a couple of files and all of that, and into something that can actually be set up on client's premises. And then of course we still have to determine of what is the model. So it essentially would be, the first, sale of the cloud system as it is, and then, for future updates and all of that. But a short answer to this kind of question is that yes, we do plan to have it. Yes, the cloud is built from uh, from the get-go, such that this will be possible. So returning to this screen. So yeah, so you see the two base stations. When you register a new base station, it will pop up as a base station registration request, and then you'll be able to do that through the new, so through the firmware update of the base station. So essentially, you're gonna need a new firmware for the base station that has this cloud. We haven't officially released this firmware, so for those who want to do the beta testing, we will provide this firmware, to you personally. But this will not be, at least until January, available on our website. Yeah, so you get some kind of basic info about your profile, passwords, whether or not you want to see temperature in Celsius or Fahrenheit, what is your RNet4 pressure unit, your name of the organization, all of that. So the interesting part is actually the dashboard. And this is the part which is kind of, not kind of, but very customizable. So this is kind of like this tile type of let's say display. So what we can do here is, we can put a new tile. So we can choose a tile type. So there are currently three tile types. So, either a sensor type table, which you see on the bottom here, either a graph, or what was the name of the third thing? So line chart, sorry, and a sensor widget. So let's choose a sensor widget. I don't know, what do I want to see? I want to see atmospheric pressure. I can choose one of the RNet 4s, and let's call it, pressure. I can choose the width of it, so let's leave it at maximum, and I can choose the position. In later versions, this will be available like as a drag and drop. For the time being, you have like position. So you can also preview it, how it will look. So this is a preview, and let's save it. And I have a new tile here. I can so I have this thing in front, so I can actually edit existing tiles, change these things. I can delete the tile completely and it's gone. If I go to the sorry. So if I go to the sensor view, I see all of the sensors over here. I can also, filter out the metrics that I want to see. So let's say I don't want to see the light sensor. I can actually send this table to the dashboard, and it, puts itself over here in the dashboard. Now it's called new widget. So, let's change the name, whatever. Uh, anyway, the chart, of course, we can create a new chart for a sensor. Let's have an ARNet4 here, and let's have another ARNet4 here, and let's have another ARNet4 here. A very colorful and lovely chart. So essentially, basically, all of these metrics that all of these things that you kind of have in the base station. The first version will not have alarms. That will come later. So yeah, very, straightforward, keeping in line of, ARNet simple, let's say, um, the simplicity concept. So in the ARNet cloud, when you see these sensors, they are kind of separated from the base station. You can, of course, know which sensor is connected to which base, but this, it doesn't, have to be. So you can set up your dashboard the way you want it. It can show multiple base stations in the same uh, place. Let's put it like let's make a line chart. So let's make a line chart of my last 7-day CO2 level. I can make it smaller. I can make it appear on the second place. Let's call it second CO2. Have to choose some sensors. And save, and you have the chart here. Of course, I could make it look a bit more beautiful and think, maybe this needs to be a bit wider or this needs to be a bit smaller, but this is just to kind of show the main idea. So for those of you that want to play around with this, again, email either me um, or your respective, sales manager, anybody who is like the main contact person for you from ARNet, and we will set up a demo account. More or less, we have come to the end of the webinar. This did actually take a bit longer than expected. Maybe I talk too much, but I don't know. This is essentially the place for Q&A, and I can see that that questions are piling in. And yes, there are different user access levels that can be configured. So for the time being, it will, for the beta test being, it can be configured on our side. Afterwards, when you manage like this organization, You can actually select different access to different users. So, one user can view only these base stations or only these sensors, or this is a uh, super user. The time frame for the cloud availability, again, this means the cloud beta will be available directly after this webinar, but this will not be for use in production because this is still a beta, and it will have all of these asterisks of that this is just for testing purposes, and there can still be errors, there are still data can disappear and things like that because we are building it. This let's say um, this then the first ready for sales version will be available as of next year, so January. Do we have the cost? We have, let's say, an indicative idea of the cost. This will also be communicated relatively soon. The main idea at the first level is that it will be depending on the count of sensors. So basically, the more sensors you use, the cheaper it is per sensor, but the more expensive, of course, the whole solution is. So this is how we will roughly make this cost structure, and uh, then the exact prices will be communicated, in the coming months, so to say. Yeah. Any other questions regarding, sensors, cloud? When do we plan the alarms? Actually a good question. I don't know this on the top of my head. This is not going to be in the first, please, demo version. I will have to ask this to our technical team, and I will actually get back to you. The cloud development roadmap as such, and all of this extra functionality uh, is still under debate. In terms of what are the priorities in terms of, like, is alarms a priority, or is something else a priority? We are doing a few integrations and things like that, and essentially what I want to say by this is that um, what I want to say with this is essentially that what we will follow the market. Basically, if there's a huge demand and a potential, for projects where this kind of cloud feature is, you know, necessary, then we will develop that faster. So with relevant projects, will all of these kind of things can be changed in terms of priority. A lot of questions came in whilst I was talking. So, will API agent still be supported next to a cloud solution? Yes. So both. So essentially, you'll have the regular API agent, which does require you having a separate computer connected to your Aeronet Pro, either over the internet or directly, and that will work as usual. And then, of course, the cloud itself will have an API, so you won't even need, a you know, a computer directly connected to this. You don't need a computer to run the agent, essentially. So basically, you'll just have a web API, where you can, play around and build your own applications on the cloud. Next question. Could you control the relay by the cloud? Um, well, probably when it comes out, yes, but the relay is, of course, further down the line. But essentially, the cloud will, after a while, double as all of this functionality that comes into, the Mark II base station and all of that. Um, so yeah. So what will be the data retention policy for the cloud service? If I am reading this question correctly, what you mean is like how long will the cloud uh, keep your data? And this is a very interesting question. This is something that I have to uh, actually ask the technical team. So I know that the current base station supports up to 10 years of data if we're talking 100 sensors sending data once every 10 minutes. Then then basically it's probably, so essentially if we're talking about virtual things and we're talking about cloud as being a virtual data storage device, then this potential, to store the data is almost, infinite. Well, in the sense of the word that there's nothing really keeping us from adding extra memory and all of that. But that will probably somehow factor in the cost structure. And this is something that I can't currently directly answer, and this will be determined. But yeah, for the time being, you know it's gonna be in years, definitely. So yeah, will be there a free limited functionality version? Yes, the answer is yes. The free limited functionality version will have a limited data retention time. So also how this will play out is to be determined, but it's probably going to be a couple of weeks of data, and then the rest of the data is automatically deleted if you have like this free version. It's just, to show you the functionality of the cloud and what you can do. So yeah, there will be one. Yeah, so data retention costs are also kind of factors into this previous question. And don't worry, we will keep this dialogue open, and these are all valid questions, and the cloud is a very new thing for us, and I haven't myself thought of all of the questions that could possibly be. So these kind of things will be relayed to our, technical team, and we will kind of design a cost structure based on, the answers and all of that. And this is why we have also this kind of beta period for our partners to actually understand what are the use cases for the cloud, where and why do they want to use it, why do they need the cloud, why do you need the cloud. So essentially, these questions will, you can send them to me or to your sales manager, and they will be, answered in a timely manner. So it is 3 minutes past 3. We had planned. Oh, another question. We had planned the webinar until 3 p.m. Yeah, well, we can have it extended, of course. Will the communication protocol between the base station and cloud be documented? Well, of course it is documented, but I don't really know what you mean by this question. So, of course, these kind of things are documented, but some of these things are, of course, also, let's say, confidential. So we can disclose them, after an NDA is signed. Um, it really depends on how deep into the technicalities you want to get, but the basic kind of things probably will be available. Um, Probably will be available for everyone, and then if you want to go into more depth, then there's a different process for that. Do customers need a base station in order to test the cloud? Well, that is quite advisable to, well, I mean, I can give you, of course, access to my base stations and you can see and play around with those, but it will be advisable to have your own base station so you can register, you can see how all of these things work. You have your own sensors, you put them, you see them in the cloud. So uh, for the full experience, uh, I would say that you would need a base station. If you just want to see some basic things, yeah, we can give you an access to some local base stations that we have here, and you can play around with that. Um, yeah. So could you define what the user could see? Example, if you have different locations. What do you mean by define? So this is essentially what the user sees, and I can have two base stations. They are in two locations in terms of, like, one is in one part of the building and the one is the other part of the building, but like I mean, this one can be also in my home. You have like tags on the sensor where you can. So this is something that I haven't played too much around, but essentially you can have tags relaying this sensor to the location, and of course, in future releases of the cloud, we are planning about things that have also some kind of maps where you can, well, just have like a file uploaded, and then you associate each tag with a place, and then you can see in different locations like that. But that is further down the line. Nice webinar. Is there an app for Android and the iOS? So essentially there is, so you have the same kind of functionality of the cloud just by accessing it over the web. So you can go to the arena.cloud via also your iPhone, or you can use your um, some other smartphone, or you can have your tablet or whatnot. Um, I know that there is an app for our web view, so basically for the base station web view, which is essentially the same web interface just copied in an app. So I would suppose it's not that big of a deal to do the same thing for the cloud. But really, this is not a top priority for us because you can use your own browser. The cloud is already built, let's say, mobile friendly. I don't know if I can, yeah, I don't know on the top of my head how could I show this from the Chrome window, how it looks on the smartphone. But for those of you who will sign up for the beta tests, you will be able to log into the cloud from your smartphones and all of these things, and you will see this ease of use also there. Thank you, kids. Thank you. It's possible to define the synchronization time to the cloud and the sample rate. This is actually an open question that I had this conversation one day ago actually with our lead cloud developer. And in general, currently, as I understand, for this version, there's like a 5-second synchronization time in the back end, and then in the front end, new information appears only when there is new information. So, like, the cloud is synchronizing with the base station every 5 seconds, but if there is like no new readings, then you won't see that synchronization happening. And this is actually an open question, and this is something that we actually want to hear from you, users. Like, what is the necessary synchronization time? Do you need this manual definition? And if you do need to, change this, why? What is the use case? So there is a lot of wiggle room here still. So these things are not set in stone. So in general, the short answer is yes, but I want to keep this dialogue with you. And if you do this beta test, mm, I want to hear like what is the necessary synchronization time and why it is like that and not other things. So a good question, thanks. So 39 people are still on the line. A couple of you left because it's probably getting a bit boring. But no, but still, if any questions, uh, just happy to answer. You can of course email me. I don't have my email up here, but I think most of you have it, or you can just ask that to your respective sales manager. So yeah, here's my email, by the way, if you have any questions after the webinar, you can send them to me over there regarding the cloud or regarding the product, and all of these things. So I'll wait a couple of more minutes, maybe a final question will arrive, but probably if you had any burning question, you would have already asked it. So again, just to remind you, the webinar will, this webinar is recorded, will be recorded. It will be put on the RNet forum. So if you go to the forum.rnet, both forum and forum with an S works, so it will resolve to the same website over here. And webinars, you will see the recording of the webinar right next to the old one. And I will probably include a questionnaire for the next webinar also here. I think nobody really answered this one beforehand, so probably good idea if you want something specific in the next webinar to answer the questionnaire. Other than that, thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for listening. I hope that I answered some of your questions. I will be waiting for those of you that want to test this webinar, test this cloud. I will be, expecting an email or, somebody or to your, respective sales manager. Yeah, so I hope that as far as it goes, you are all satisfied with the RNet solutions. We have a lot of big plans in hand in the future, and the RNet ecosystem is, just growing. New sensors, the cloud is kind of the baby steps into this software part. We'll have a lot of integrations, a lot of functionalities. It will become a lot more interesting in the near future, other than, just graphs and possibility to view the sensors. But you kind of have to create this strong backbone for it to be stable. On only then on top of it you can build these things that actually last and don't break down. So it has been quite a while until we got to the cloud, but now we are finally in these first steps. And then after that the sky is the limit. So thank you all for listening, and I will terminate this webinar right now. So have a nice afternoon or the day ahead to our American colleagues. Uh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So yeah, any questions, email me, call me. Thanks. Bye.